Hello artists! Today our watercolor project is going to be inspired by a contemporary artist, Sandra Silsberwig. She was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. She and her husband have 2 adult sons and she's been painting all her life. She calls herself a contemporary painter of the visionary outsider art. She sells her work online and at local and international galleries. She's inspired by primitive figures, goddesses, animals, tribal and spiritual symbols. She says she's attracted to big, bold, colorful image, and you can see that in her work. You'll also see a lot of patterns, designs, dots, and lines. To me, her faces remind me of Picasso's Cubist portraits. Let's get started. In front of me, I have my watercolor paper and then just a piece of copy paper. On the copy paper, I'm just going to practice some different faces and then decide which one I really like to put on my watercolor paper. I'm using a crayon to draw with. If you have crayons, you can use crayons as well. If you don't, that's okay. You could use a pencil, a permanent marker, a regular pen. Any of those things would be fine. The crayon is a little waxy, so it lets you draw and then paint over the top of it, and the watercolor will resist the crayon. So crayon works well, but don't worry about it if you don't have a crayon. I'm trying out some different noses in the style that Sandra has of her portraits, so I'm just going to practice a few on my copy paper and then decide which one I like the best. You can decide the same thing. You could try one like I did, or you could come up with your own. You'll notice the face is going to take up a lot of our paper, so that curve that I made across the bottom is showing where the face is going to end. That's the chin of our face. And this kind of drawing that Sandra did is abstract. It doesn't have to look like a realistic face. Obviously, by looking at her examples, you can tell they're not realistic. They're just kind of fun and abstract. So there's no one right way to make a nose. There's no one right way to make an eye or a mouth. Just go with it and do what feels right to you. On this practice face, I'm going to try a little eye and then just make some random designs around it. On my next practice face, I'm going to try a little bit bigger eye that takes up a lot of space. So this is my little eye. Now I'm going to go all the way from the side of my paper over to the nose so you can see a much wider eye. Give it some eyelashes. The eyes don't even have to line up with each other. You'll notice on this example, I made one low eye, one high eye. So it doesn't matter. If you like the look of that, go for it. If you don't, this time I'm going to make 2 wide eyes that are directly across from each other. Remember how Sandra used a lot of pattern and design in her paintings. So you can just fill in with any kind of pattern or design that you like. This could be done now when we're drawing it before we paint. It could also be added later. So after the painting is done, you could go in with a crayon or an oil crayon over the top of your dry painting and add more pattern and design. So I'm going to add a little bit before, and then I'm also going to go back and add more after my painting is done. All right, time to pick my eyes. I think I like the really wide eye that goes all the way across. And I like the ones that were lined up with each other. So that's what I'm going to make on my watercolor paper. 2 wide eyes. The top of it is going to be the eyelid. The bottom of it is going to be the pupil. And then I'm just going to add in a little bit of design. Looks like some eyelashes and pattern around the eye. I'm sticking with one purple crayon for my whole drawing and pressing kind of hard with it. You don't want to be super light. You want to press down so that it stays when you start painting. If you wanted to switch colors while you're drawing, that's fine too. I just chose to stick with one purple color for the drawing part of it. All right, let's try out some mouths. We could just do a small set of lips. We could go a little longer. It's up to you again. Which one do you like the best? You could make your face happy, angry, sad. This is your chance to put the emotion that you want to show in your portrait. The mouth tends to say a lot. In mine, I'm just kind of keeping a serious looking face. I'm also adding in a little bit of design on the face. Remember, we can do some of it now, and we can always add more later if you want to. I'm also dividing up the space of the face so that there's different areas to use my watercolors. And if you want lots of divisions, that's fine. If you want not so many, that's fine too. You decide how many colors you want to use. You could pick a color scheme. Just go with it and decide what you like the look of. All right, I'm done with my practice faces. I know what I want my real one to look like on my watercolor paper. So I'm just going to wrap up the final little touches that I wanted to do on it, and then I'll be ready to start adding some paint. Okay guys, I have my paint set up now. You'll notice that I put my watercolor paper on top of some newspaper, but I don't have it taped down. We're not gonna get super soaked with water on our painting today, so the paper can just sit there on top of some newspaper and that'll be fine. I've decided to go with a cool color scheme for most of the face, but I like that shape up on the top of the forehead. It kind of reminds me of a sunset or a sunrise. So I'm going to have some contrast with a little bit of warm colors up there and a little bit on the lips and the heart. So just a little bit of contrast against the cool color scheme. One nice thing about this painting with the sections, you can paint one section at a time with a color and make, since it's very quickly, you can blend your brush strokes in together and they won't show later on. Just keep that area wet and blend your brush strokes together. The crayon that you used is going to make a little bit of a barrier to keep your wet colors from blending where you don't want them to. So I had that picture drawn in crayon and I'm going right up to the crayon, but I'm not actually touching one color to another wet color, which allows me to get my painting done pretty quickly. Now, if you didn't use a crayon, if you had to use a pencil or permanent marker or a regular pen, then you'll want to take a little bit more time and just paint things that aren't touching each other. Let them dry before you bring one color right up to another color. Then you won't get any unnecessary blending of colors. Since this is a neck, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow underneath the chin to make it look like the chin is sticking out a little bit from away from the neck. Now I'm adding the little bit of pop of warm colors. Remember, I wanted a little bit of contrast. So the lips and the heart, I used some red violets in. But the rest of the face, all in those cools, it looks very sad, doesn't it? The cool colors kind of make it look sad and serious. This was just the color scheme that I decided to use today, but by all means, you can paint yours whatever color you are feeling, whatever color you decide you want to go with. If you want to use a color scheme, great. If you just want to make it wild and colorful, that's great too. Up to you, you're painting, you're the artist. Here I go on my little sunset feature on the forehead, and that's going to bring in a little bit of happiness. I've decided that I'm going to keep the whites of the eyes just as they are, and I'm also going to leave the side of the neck just the white watercolor paper, but that part could get filled in if you wish. It's up to you too. My final step is going in and adding a little pattern with my crayon now that my paint is dry. And that is it. I hope you've enjoyed this painting inspired by Sandra Silsberwig, and I hope to see yours soon.